Okay, my name is Craig Mellon. I'm a commissioner on the Economic Development Commission for the town of Groton. This is a restaurant forum available to answer questions and solicit input from restaurants as well on what it's like to manage in the Groton Greater Mystic area. We are fortunate to have several experts to help us address the questions. One is Scott Dolch, who is Executive Director, Connecticut Restaurant Association. In addition, we have Katie Baldwin, who's Supervisor of Regulated Facilities and Housing for the Ledge Light District. Also joining us as a panelist is Paige Bronk. He will step in as needed. He's the Economic and Community Development Manager for the town of Groton. We do have an agenda that we're going to work through. There are a number of other people who are not on the screen who are joining us as guests or participants, depending upon your choice as we go. We've put out a survey in advance, which identified a number of issues that people wanted to talk about, and we have them in rank order as employee recruitment and retention, supply chain issues, masking, COVID issues, and basically just can't keep up with all the issues to run a restaurant. If we get past all of those, we'll then move on to any other questions or issues that people may have. Before we get started, I'd ask each of Scott and Katie to talk a little bit about what their roles are and how that might affect or connects to our community and our community restaurants. So Scott, if I could ask you to unmute and go ahead and tell us about yourself and the role, that'd be great. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Craig, and everybody for having me. I'm Scott Dolch, as Craig mentioned. I run the Connecticut Restaurant Association. For those that don't know much about our association, our job is really to be an advocate for this industry. The role kind of heightened and little more work to do once this pandemic hit as well. And my job with my staff is to make sure we communicate as much as we can to everybody that's on this call or throughout the state that runs a restaurant, catering facility or private event facility in the state, making sure you guys are aware of changes that are going on, trying to advocate for help and support on a not just a state level, but also on a federal level. So I was down in DC a couple of weeks ago, trying to work with our delegates. I know everyone has been fortunate, hopefully, here on this call with PPP first and second draw, and as well as if you were fortunate enough to get the RRF funding as we continue to work for replenishment down there in DC. But yeah, no, that's pretty cut and dry of what we do as an association and help you guys that are on this call for any questions that you have. As big as funding to as small as having an issue with like your grease trap and who can I talk to and getting support. So and really just try to be that advocate for you. And I know you guys have a lot of questions today, kind of where we stand as a state, where we stand nationally as well, and try to help answer those questions as we move forward. So just happy to be a part of this call and happy to see, I don't see your faces, but see some of these names on here of attendees, and hope you guys are holding up okay with your restaurants. As we had a great weather weekend, but we all know rising costs with worker shortage we'll get into, and the food costs and those challenges that you're still faced with. So thank you again, Craig, for having me.
Scott, I do have one question for you. If someone hasn't formally joined the Connecticut Restaurant Association, are you still available to them, or how does that work?
No, it's a great question, Craig. I can tell you, and as my chairman of my board is on this call, Dan Miser, I'm sure he's listening in, we made sure we took a hard stance when the pandemic started that it's not about membership for us. We hope that at some point everyone will become a member of the CRA, but our job throughout the pandemic is to help any restaurant, caterer, private event venue through this. And you all have different challenges. You're all, as I always say, every restaurant has a story, but especially in this pandemic, what you're going through individually, it's not about, oh, well, I'm not a member of the CRA, I don't know if I should reach out to them. That should be the last thing you're thinking about. Please reach out to us and my entire staff to help you try to answer questions and get through this together.
Thanks, Scott. And Katie, can you tell us a little bit about your role as it affects the restaurants in this area?
Sure. Yes. Hi, Katie Baldwin with Ledge Light Health District. Thank you for having me here as well. Ledgely Health District, for those of you who may not know, is your local health department. So we cover the towns of Stonington, North Stonington, Ledyard, Groton, New London, East Lyme, and Old Lyme. Excuse me. So we are responsible for your restaurant inspections and enforcing the public health code. So as Scott mentioned, though, we're also here to help you. So not only are we your regulatory authority, we're also here to support you, answer your questions, help educate you if there's anything you don't understand or if there's anything you need help working through. I want you to know that we're a resource for that as well. So that's pretty much where I fall here for this phone call. So anything with food safety or how to kind of work through things that are going on with the pandemics. I guess most recently with the pandemic, the governor gave us a lot of responsibility with enforcement of any rules or mandates. So that's something that I can help answer as well with this call. Thank you.
One follow-up question for you. Are the mandates you're doing then? I mean, like if you impose the mandates in some of the areas and not others, or how does that happen?
So, excuse me, the mandates right now that are enforceable that we are in charge of enforcing is just the mask mandate. However, we didn't put the mask mandate in place. The governor left it up to the town municipal leaders to put a indoor mask mandate in place. And then he gave local health the authority to enforce the mask mandate. So while we support the decision of any municipal that has put one of those in place, we also have to enforce it. Again, like I mentioned, we approach it as a education, and we'll work with you to figure out how we can make it work better.
Okay, great, thanks. So format here, we're going to go through the series of 4 issues first that I identified. Going to suggest that I'll put forward a first question on each of these. If people have additional questions you want to ask, you can type them in and we'll be able to see them and draw from those. But for answers, sometimes those of you who are out in the field will have better answers or great answers or experiences to describe, and that would be hard to put in a written message. So for those, if you raise your hand, we'll be able to call on you in order to let you know that there is an issue that you want to talk about. So let's start first with the employee recruitment and retention. I guess first, Scott, we're hearing a lot about how hard it is to recruit, and I suspect that this is not just isolated to our area, it's all over. Can you say a little bit about what's going on and what people are doing to address that issue? You're on mute, Scott.
Still on mute. Sorry, guys. Should be used to Zoom now by 19 months. I think this is the #1 topic. We did a survey, everyone listening in on the call. If you are able to find full staff, congratulations, you're probably in the 1%. And I know it's a challenge. And I think, I wish there was and I've said this from the beginning, there is no magic bullet. I think people thought, hey, when the federal $300 was going to go away, or, daycare or other challenges that are going on. I understand, just so everyone's aware, this is across the country. This isn't just a restaurant specific issue. This is really retail, distribution. Everywhere is having a challenge with staffing. But just so you guys have a clear understanding of Connecticut right now, we are about 23,000 jobs short of where we were in February 2020. So pre-pandemic, levels of 160,000 jobs were about 137 is the last numbers that I saw. So why is that? Where have they gone? I think a lot of you guys know, with the challenges that happened in the first few months of the pandemic, people, in this workforce started looking elsewhere. They have found other jobs, and trying to get them back has been an issue. But right now, I think the focus for us as the CRA is to try to find solutions to the problem. And what I mean by that is, I know, a lot of you guys probably got letters from the DOL in regards to extensions of unemployment benefits to some, and we're trying to get answers. I actually spoke to the DOL on Friday. They want to have you people on this call be more of an helping with enforcement. I know you post a job and you get about 40 applicants, and then maybe one shows up if you're lucky. We're trying to kind of fix that issue. I think just so everyone knows, normal times, our unemployment levels in the state are anywhere between 40 and 45,000 people. We are still about 90 to 95,000 people applying weekly for unemployment. So there's a big gap there. Are they all in our industry? No, they're not. But I think that we need to do our part as a CRA to work with DOL and others to try to close that gap. I've been on multiple calls with the state. Actually, Old Lyme is a location where a family has landed. I'm going to turn over every rock, and I use that as an example where the Afghan refugees, as they come into our state, as you guys can imagine, we're trying to find placement for them for jobs. And our industry, is without question one that I think, as long as they have at least a little bit of an English background, which a lot of these folks do, being former SIVs or other things, they might have an opportunity to come work for you. It obviously depends on where they land, but I actually found out a family's getting placed in Old Lyme over the last week. So we're trying to find, the future workforce. I have a call next week with workforce development at the state, trying to help, look everywhere we can and support our industry and help you in this. And I think, unfortunately, I would just share this isn't, doom and gloom and grim. But I think if you are thinking that your industry or your restaurant specifically is going to get back to 100% staffing levels in the next month to 2 months, I'd love to tell you that's the truth, but that's not the reality. And I think it is going to take six months to 12 months for us to kind of get through this. This is the cause of COVID, the same way with food costs, and which we'll get into and other things, but you need to be preparing for the winter ahead. I know as I listen and look at the names on here, you guys are down in the Groton, Stonington, area. Understand that, getting to next March and April when we can have the weather turn again is going to be critical. And how efficient your restaurant can be over the next 6 months is what you have to make tough decisions, whether it's how many hours you're open, what days you're open, how big your menu is, what you're going to do outside or inside, winter, opportunities outside or not with heaters. But understand that I think the next 6 months are critical for our industry and our state. I'm going to do what I can trying to find the workforce. We have a job board on the CRA where you can post jobs. We are actually on the flip side putting up resumes. We worked with Gateway Community College 2 weeks ago. We put up about 12 resumes of people that are coming out looking for opportunities for work. Please use us as a resource, but understand that this solution to the problem is very complex and very challenging. But at the same time, I hope you guys understand that we are trying to find solutions, but I think everyone also knows on this call what has happened and transpired over the last 19 months that has caused this kind of challenge that you're faced with, and you got to be prepared. And I know how hard everyone is working. I guess the last comment I'll make, Craig, is I know that the restaurateurs on this call have worked harder in the last probably 4 to 5 months than they've ever worked in their lifetime, probably of their restaurant, and where you maybe had managers or cooks or chefs and you're back there working 18-hour days. I feel for that, and I know how hard that is. And I think making sure you're taking care of yourself and you're understanding, taking care of your staff, that you need to weather this storm for the next 6 months and help us get to the other side and start real recovery. You're not recovering right now. We have to get to that point where you start real recovery as an industry.
Thanks, Scott. One of the issues that seems to be coming up is the level of compensation for employees. Are people finding any relief by increasing the rates? Is it getting to the point where people can't afford it? And as I ask that question, I'm going to also suggest that if anyone in the audience wants to raise a question, please write it. Paige will be able to see those questions and help to flag you so that you can be called upon to answer. But Scott, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and it's what I'm trying to tell the media every day is to paint the picture of what's really going on. And your cost of labor have increased. If it haven't, there's just, looking at our survey data and results, you've had to pay people more. Yes, we had an increase in minimum wage in September to $13 an hour, but there is wage inflation and how that kind of works with, you might have had someone working for 2 or 3 years making 16, 17, and they're looking for a raise, but also the competitive marketplace. This is like a buyer's market of a housing market. Like employees are going to you, unfortunately, and saying, even if they have no experience at all, and they're almost demanding when they want to work, how much they want to get paid. And I could tell you, I could feel that frustration of what you guys are going through and how you're trying to balance that, because, people coming in with little to no experience, expecting to make more money, or they're going to go walk and try to go somewhere else. And that's disheartening, and trying to figure out solutions to that. But yeah, I mean, there's no way that you haven't had to increase your labor costs. I know your margins are getting squeezed as we go through this, as I was trying to talk to Craig and Katie last week, just about how challenging this industry is in good times, and how hard it is when if you know, you guys are the best in the business that I've ever learned about understanding your costs. I listen to restaurateurs all the time where they're like, my labor costs last week were 37%. I have to get them back down to 34. They're at 36, or it went up to 39 last week. I know that's your world. And I think that's the reality. Is you have to, it goes back to the last comment I make about efficiency and figuring out how best you can run your business and keeping your margins and trying to turn a profit, and how you do that in a competitive market when, you know, I can only imagine what your dishwasher, which is usually the starting rate down here in New London County, are going, because I know in Fairfield County, I think the competitive market on a dishwasher is like anywhere between 19, 20, 21 bucks an hour, which, you know, wasn't the case to 20 months ago, and how that impacts everybody else inside your restaurant.
Thanks. Okay, Paige, are there any, we're going to take questions first and then comments where people might have additional advice second. So any questions that are coming up from people who are observing?
Craig, I think people are going to have to raise their hand. For some reason, the chat option is not functioning, but no worries. I think we can keep an eye on those who are raising their hands. I don't think we have any hands as of yet. If anyone does have a question, please use that raise hand button.
Then let me ask for follow-up. If there are any people who want to make a comment about this, things that you're doing to address these issues, would also welcome those hands.
Craig, just one last point I think I forgot to mention here in my notes. As you guys talk about efficiency, and as a CRA, we're happy to kind of give you guys some guidance or some context. I think everyone knows on this call that we are an industry that is always looking ahead and looking at trends, and how you're utilizing technology. And I hate to say that because we obviously want more people in the workforce. Without question, you want to hire more people and have a larger staff. But if they're not there, how you can utilize technology to help you, in different ways. And there's a lot of restaurants that have been looking at it across the country. I've been in different meetings. We all thought QR codes were extinct in 2017. They're back and fully functional. My grandmother now knows how to use a QR code and figure out a menu or figure out the staffing level and making an order. But that's the reality. And also on to go and making sure that is a big part of your business right now. I think survival here is, you need to figure out a way to have 20, 30% of your sales being to go. But preparing ahead for that with utilizing technology to possibly offset staffing challenges that you might have. You're going to need to look at that and continue. And we're here to kind of help with some companies that we've worked with and other solutions to that. Nothing goes away from having a server and a face and having that experience. But at the same time, unfortunately, where you guys are at 60, 65% staffing, when you have that demand, how do you balance that? So.
Paige?
I have a few points before the end of the meeting I'd like to make, but that particular point hits home regarding one of my points, and that is we are moving through basically our ARPA funding right now, and that's federal money. For those who are not aware, I think everyone does. It's come to every municipality, and we have not distributed that fund yet. We're in the process of conducting a needs assessment, and we're not that interested. Groton's not that interested in just subsidizing operations. We would like to help businesses, nonprofits, public safety, public health, basically do something special. And in terms of business, we have been seeking ideas regarding how businesses might pivot, how they might get a leg up. And when you mentioned technology, that is something I think we are interested in, restaurants and more. How can we help restaurants with a greater digital presence, possibly deal with declining labor? So any ideas that you have moving forward, we are interested in trying to assist with some of that funding. But again, we're not interested in simply subsidizing existing operations.
Thanks, Paige. I do have a question actually that will connect to Katie. If you're short on employees, that means some are going to get stretched. And one of Katie's roles is to watch out for the health of people who are working. So I guess I'm curious as to where any advice or any thoughts in terms of supporting employees and not having them overwork or not have them work when they've got COVID or any of those kinds of issues. Can first Katie and then Scott, you may have some comments on that as well, but Katie, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, you know, with employee retention and turnover, sometimes one of the first things that start to be dismissed or not thought of is food safety. So we're concerned with the certified food protection manager, the qualified food operator, that, you know, that role is responsible for training their staff and making sure that they are competent in food safety knowledge. And these are the basics, you know, hand washing, not coming to work when you're sick, knowing certain food temperatures. These are kind of the first things that start to go when you're busy. And you may not grab that thermometer, or you may not choose to wash your hands at a certain time. So I think it's important that even though the staff they may be coming and going rather fast, it's important though to take that time to sit down with them and understand that this education will help them serve safe food to the public. And that's our ultimate goal. So I think that's really important, having those conversations, especially I think most obviously right now is COVID, but you also want to pay attention to, you know, vomiting, diarrhea, those types of symptoms too. You should not be working with food when you have those. So I think that, and I think Scott made a lot of really good points. You may have to make some really tough decisions. You may have to consider shortening your hours. You may have to consider altering your menu. There's certain things that you may want to consider because, like I said, the ultimate goal and the thing that we care about the most is that you're serving safe food to the public. So there are going to be some things that you may have to tweak in order to make that happen.
Thanks. Anything else from any of the panelists, Scott?
No, I think Katie hit, you know, we got to make sure, and we've done a great job of keeping people safe in our industry. I think everyone on this call knows that. You know, our industry has been a leader, and we always have been in safety and sanitation. No other business has public health go through a quarterly basis, as I joke with retail and others. Like we make sure we lead that, and I think making sure you're not cutting corners in that area. I hope no one obviously on this call, but down there. So no, I think that's something you got to continue to think about. But back to Paige's point real quick. I mean, Paige, my only comment to you would just continue as I talk to 169 different town, DCD staffs and town staff about their ARPA funds. But I agree. I think a lot of them are looking, hey, we don't want to do grants. We just don't want to just give them straight money. But I do think this is a chance to really, making sure you have leaders on that call, like a Dan or others in that area to say, okay, what can we do to elevate hospitality moving forward? How do we use these funds, whether it's, expansion, sidewalks, parking, things that are going to continue to attract and help not only retail, but not only restaurants, retail, hotels. You guys do a phenomenal job down there already. But I keep saying to folks, like making sure you're putting the right people in the room, because you can always do it better. And there's always opportunities. And this is an opportunity right now where typically you don't have federal funding at this level. But I think putting the right people in the room, and it's besides just myself, it's definitely having leaders in those different areas to talk about, okay, what have been the challenges of the past and what are ways, and I give kind of a little analogy of like West Hartford, we're close to where our offices are, but what they've done with their streets and things, but they're looking to do stuff more permanently, as opposed to, are you going to allow expanded outdoor dining into the future? But what are some things, that can be done to elevate and allow more traffic, but also, and use the word traffic, less congestion with some of these funds. So I would also say, besides technology, I think other ideas that we are working on, it goes back to Katie's point. We actually teach over 1,700 people serve safe classes a year through the CRA. We have, people that come, we do try to put up classes down in the New London County area, but there's also ways to possibly utilize those funds to help offset people that are looking to get into, because it's about $170, between $150 and $170 to take that class to get certified. And typically the restaurant owners have to put that burden, but maybe there's a way to utilize funds and say, hey, we're going to offer, so that may make sure more people are certified, because you need to have that qualified, person on staff at all times and helping in that side. I think the restaurants, it would go a long way, Paige, but there's a lot of ideas. I would just say, which is great about this call, is continuing to talk about how we can get this industry back on its feet and fully recover, but also for the betterment of restaurants into the future.
Okay, let's move on to supply chain issues. I guess I'll turn to you again, Scott, in terms of what, certainly probably all the restaurants know what they're facing in terms of supply chain issues. What are you seeing, and what are you seeing effective steps to try to mitigate that a bit in these times?
Yes, try not to be a doom and gloom call, Craig, but it's good. Just keep. This is the reality that everyone's faced with right now. And why is that? I think what I try to give the analogy to folks, if you don't understand, it's like I use the analogy of being at a stoplight where you're 15 cars back, the light turns green. By the time you start going, it's like 45 seconds. And that's what's happened on the supply chain. A lot of the distributors nationally have, obviously they have staffing shortages themselves, but their warehouse, they really they didn't want to lose money. They didn't want to close down their business. So they utilize everything in their warehouse, and they're not backfilled. And the demand is higher than ever, but they don't have the product. So the cost is rising because the demand is there and they don't have the staffing. So all of that is the secondary, just like worker shortage. It's a secondary effects of COVID, and it's going to take time to get it back to where it should be. I'd love to see the numbers of protein and seafood go down for a lot of you folks down there in the New London County of having to deal with. I just can't believe the cost of some of the products that you're dealing with right now. But it's not just food. It's plastics, paper. All of that is playing that role. So my goal to you right now is, you guys have, I hate to use, I feel like the word of 19 months is pivot, but understanding that everything happens on a whim. You might get a call on your driver tonight at 7 o'clock, might not have 3 products on that truck. You've all dealt with it. You've had a chance to, okay, well, my menu's got to change. I have to have flexibility in my menu to change on the fly. My costs might change. How does that affect, my bottom line and my margins and what I'm going to pay the consumers? But I would also prepare yourself. If you have a really great takeout model, if you're not looking at how you're doing takeout right now with your containers, you should start talking to your distributor right now about the containers you have, because I promise you those costs are going to continue to rise, or you might not be able to get them. And then that just talks about the service you're trying to provide to your customers, because you can't get, a paper box that you're trying to put, a meal in, or you're paying 3 times more in a couple months. So preparing, and I don't want anybody to bulk buy in a huge way, but I do think, again, it goes back to looking at a 6-month schedule and saying, okay, what are the expectations? What do I think I'm going to have? And how do I prepare for it? And be honest, I know a lot of people have said to me on your food distributors, well, I've been with PFG, or I've been with Gordon Foods, I've been with Chef's Warehouse. I'm just going to kind of ride the storm out. That's okay. But I also think the distributors understand where, I've seen a lot of restaurateurs utilize multiple distributors now than ever before, because sometimes you just can't get it. And no fault of maybe a partner you've had for a long time, but if they don't understand that, maybe they aren't your long-term distributor. I think at the end of the day, they should be trying to help you recover and survive, and let you know and be honest if they don't have products or they can't get it to you, because what the effect is at the end of the day is the service you're providing to your customers. And if they say they're going to get you something and they don't, and I hate to say that, because all of our distributors have really been great and stepped up in our state. But at the same time, the reality is, for me, it's about survival of everyone on this call. And how do I help you guys get through it? And that's the unfortunate reality of what's going on and why you're seeing stuff. But you need to continue to ask questions about stuff you use all the time. Fry oil is up 58%. Just alone. I mean, the people that are doing chicken wings, the cost of wings and fry oil, you might as well get into a different business. I get that. But to understand that you need to be kind of looking ahead, asking the right questions with your distributors. Hey, what are you guys running short of? Am I going to be okay? Where we are with cost? Can I set a cost? Can I buy this in bulk, or you just deliver it to me for the next 6 months? Kind of like oil, when, type of ideas. But I do think you need to have those honest conversations. I'd love to tell you the distribution channels are going to flip in the next couple of weeks and be back to normal. You guys all know that's not the reality. Just the same way your restaurant's not going to be back to normal. So, I hope those are kind of helpful answers. But at the same time, if you have any challenges with the distributor or you're hearing things, please reach out to us. We can try to, work through that together here if that's what we're hearing in other parts of the state or other parts of the country. And I worry about even some of these distributors that are making up for losses. And everyone wants to ask me right now, like, when is the stuff going to start to flatten and start to go back down? That's a great question. And I think that's the other concern I have, because looking at your costs right now compared to what you were paying before, we haven't, with the inflation and everything else, it's putting such a burden on you of what you turn over to your customers as a price point for you to make money. So I just say stay on top of it, ask the right questions. I know it's extra work for all of you. You have been working hard enough. But if not, you might get caught where, all of a sudden your packaging is 4 times more expensive, or it's not going to come this week and you've got to go coming up on a Friday, Saturday. What are you going to do? And that has happened at other restaurants where if they're not prepared, it can have a negative effect very quickly.
Scott, I'm listening to your advice, and you sort of raised both sides of an issue in terms of purchasing ahead but not overdoing it. How do we avoid a toilet paper situation like the beginning of COVID, where people flocked to the stores and hoarded it all, and therefore there was none for anyone else, and at the same time people needed toilet paper when they needed it?
Yeah, I think that, and what I've learned on the group that's on this call, as I see the names and others, is making sure you're talking to your peers. I think the one thing that I love about this industry is you think that everyone's very competitive, but they also, they trust each other, that, and they help each other. And I think, there's opportunities to find creative solutions as well. So yeah, I just think that the concern I have is, we don't want to see people bulk buy and store stuff or whatever else. But again, remember that we aren't all independent owned restaurants. We have chains and franchises that have opportunities to purchase things in bulk that can have an effect on your price and can have an effect on actually getting the product. But what I'm saying by continue to talk to your peers about figuring out what, I use the to-go model is the perfect example of what you're doing on your to-go, what products, who's the company you're using, and maybe there's an opportunity to bulk buy as a group down there. Maybe there's 5 or 6 restaurateurs are like, hey, we all use this paper container box, let's make sure that, not one of us is left out as we go through this, and look out for each other. Or when you hear things, don't be afraid to share that, because I can't speak to New London County all the time like I could to Litchfield County, or maybe there's a different distributor, because you guys all do have different partners that you use, but in the cities that you're in, you all pretty much use a lot of the same, which is what I've learned. So I just think the communication is key in supporting each other. I know, Craig, you brought up to me that Adam, Young is looking at some opportunities and other options with, possibly bulk buying or warehouse or things that are important to him and his business. But again, I think that, yes, you want to be competitive, but also I don't think anyone wants to see a restaurant go under. You want to all see yourselves, make it through. And I think that's the communication is critical and key. And as much as I can give you information, and I've said, Dan knows this, and others that I see on the call, and Bruce, picking up the phone and calling one of your peers and saying, hey, is this right? Where are you getting your fry oil from? Did this just go up, 20% in the last week? Those are the things that kind of help me, because every market is different and what you guys are dealing with and how you're going to prepare. Because we knew that worker shortage or food distribution or costs were coming. But I think, as I've learned, maybe it's job security, there's always a new challenge. What's the new challenge on the horizon? And we're trying to get out ahead of that and be a leader here. And anything I could know from you guys is important as well. So I hope that's helpful, Craig. But yeah, I just would say utilizing your peers in the area that you're in to help you make good decisions, and obviously don't bulk buy for certain things, to hurt others, but also make sure you protect your restaurant as well.
So the example of a restaurateur who owns multiple sites that allows for a certain amount of warehousing or without overdoing purchasing, are you seeing any group warehousing that might sort of dampen the huge effect of ordering too much, but provide some availability to a collection of restaurants? Is that happening anywhere in the state?
I haven't seen, I know I've heard of others, some of the larger groups we have in the state, Harvard Restaurant Group, Max Restaurant Group, and others that are looking at things, but I'm less fearful of them overbuying and bulk buying if they were to do stuff for like, if they have 9 or 10 restaurants. My bigger fear is, and nothing against they are members, but it's Darden or Brinker, which owns Chili's, and, Darden, obviously Olive Garden and Capitol Grill. When you're talking about thousands of locations across the country, and then they start going after distributor. And that's why I go back to the distributor conversation is, sometimes one distributor might be able to get the product because they're not being bulk bought by larger groups at the time. Maybe it's that product. They might be able to get you something else, but unfortunately, that's also, when you have the Dunkin' brands or certain things that they might be taking off the shelves of those distributors, that all of a sudden you're wondering why. And that's why communicating with your peers right now is crucial, because it could only be one product. It could be fry oil with one distributor, but everything else they can get to you. And it could be the opposite on another distributor. It could be, protein costs or whatever else. And I think that's why you have to be flexible right now. And I know you want to be loyal to your vendors and your partners, which I want you to be, but also you have to be honest and upfront with them and hope that they're doing the same to you.
So I'd like to follow up on your thoughts about communicating with peers and throw it open to everyone who's observing as well, in terms of raise your hands if you want to. Are there in place any mechanisms that facilitate in our local area restaurants coming together to jointly look at things, or is that something that we could facilitate in terms of helping you all to do that, or is that something that could happen through the restaurant association to do that? Or is there a mechanism for that, or is it best left to informal connections? If you have a comment or want to say something, raise your hand. If not, I guess I'd ask Scott whether the association is doing anything to facilitate those informal communications.
Yeah, we obviously aren't like putting a warehouse up or trying to bulk buy, just, understanding that, being a separate C6 and a business and everything else and all the different LLCs that are out there for the different, I don't want to be left with, 40,000 paper boxes of to go because we don't need it all. And not that I wouldn't find solutions in that side. I would just say, the biggest thing is a lot of you guys do have, even if you have 1 or 2 restaurants, you possibly have storage facilities or things that, we're not talking about all kinds of, yes, I know walk-in coolers and stuff are sometimes hard to look at in protein and how you want to do that. But as far as the paper products and such, sometimes a lot of the distributors too, Craig, will allow you to store it in their location, and you bulk buy. So you just say, hey, I want to buy, 2 pallets of X, Y, and, please, we don't need it all at our restaurant right now because it's small. We don't have location, and they can just distribute it to them when they make their normal deliveries. So I think there's more flexibility, I would think, that way is when you look at it, or you guys, if you try to bulk buy as a group together or others, but it's the same distributor, and say, hey, we want to make sure. I would go that route, where they do have warehouses. The challenge is just getting drivers and getting to you all the time. But if they, last thing you want to do is try to, I think, buying every single week when the price is changing, and it's changing for the worse, is where you can kind of get caught. And I think that would be my advice right now when you talk to a Trimark or to, even like a Chef's Warehouse on certain foods, everything else. If it's non-perishable, they should be able to store it in a lot of the different U.S. foods, all the different warehouses they have in the state, and then make sure that they're, not getting rid of it for somebody else, and you're holding them accountable too.
Thanks. Paige, you have a comment?
Yes. So, you mentioned you're not really aware of anyone who's necessarily coming together, whether it's private or public. It makes me think, we recently have been stockpiling PPE, and I know it's a different product. However, our concerns were supply chain based. In the event our community could not get access, or maybe even access at a reasonable price, we have planned for that. And we have contemplated in the past, would it make any sense to maybe be the an entity that goes and buys some of these paper products in bulk, in the event that we got to a position where our businesses, our restaurants could not get these products. Really outside the box on that, but have you ever heard of any government doing that? Is that something that you think has any potential?
My concern that I just listened, Paige, and I think it's a great thought. I think this PPE is a little bit different because typically, you know, that is obviously things that you can't control. But then when you start talking about paper products, you know, what are the paper products? Everyone has different, you know, containers or things they want to do in their restaurants, or they've always done it this way or that. And I just think my other concern is then are you charging the businesses for, you know, 1,000 of those containers? You have them, you're going through the town. Like there's just so many, I think, variables that's why I'm on the CRA side, that why we kind of stay out of that role, because there are, you know, every business is different, how they're set up, S Corp, LLCs. I just think that there's a lot of, it could make it more challenging in the long run. But again, I'm not saying it's if there are ideas, this is kind of the first time it's been brought up in this way, even from town level and everything else. I would more lean on the people on this call about what they're seeing, what they're thinking. Because again, like how you transport a hamburger and fries in a container is different than how you might, you know, bowl of soup, or, you know, it's just, there's a million different products out there, and how you do it. You want to be also with what you can do in certain towns with plastics versus not. What, you know, can you have plastic bags? No, all of those things that I think could also get us in trouble. I don't want to see you guys saying, hey, we try to help the restaurants. We bought 100,000 of X, and we, you know, we still have them stocked up 3 years down the road, when those dollars could have maybe gone somewhere else to help the businesses in the long run. I think that's, you know, it's not at a point yet, as Craig's bringing up, where like I see it's like a toilet paper shortage. I don't think it is that. I just think the bigger thing I'm seeing is when certain suppliers start to lose it, it becomes a demand angle, and they're like, oh, well, I only have this much, I'm going to charge this much more. And that's where the restaurateurs have to be understanding and looking at their price points to go, why did this go up 90 cents in a week, you know, per product? Like what is going on? And hearing from their distributor, because then they can also switch and go, okay, is this the fair rate that I'm paying? And asking, you know, a colleague or whatever else, because that's what I don't want to have happen, where I think when distributors go low on certain things, you know, it's, you know, how much will you pay at Costco for a roll of toilet paper when there's nothing there? I think people went back and early on would probably pay $100. And I think that's also the thing that scares me. So I don't think it's a bad thought, Paige. I just would just be cautious that, you know, trying to be PPE with masks and everything else, even that, I think a lot of the restaurants, not that they wouldn't have taken some of that stuff, but at least from our industry, we are in the service. Like they all wanted cloth with like their logo on it. They wanted to, you know, go out and find, you know, we try to do some things as well, but everything we did is we kind of put them in contact with the suppliers that we knew. And what I'm trying to do is, as I go to a meeting in Providence next week with 30 CEOs, is to try to learn what's going on with distribution. Like, what is the next concern? Like, is it just protein? Is it paper? Is it plastics? You know, what's something else that's on the horizon that we can get out ahead of and help educate? Because that's the real reality right now is, but again, I just think that there's not a uniform paper product, I guess, that I would see in even all your restaurants that are down there, of how they do to go and who they use as distributors as well. It's not the same. So that would be my only concern, but it's not a bad thought. I think all these are great conversations. I would just be hesitant and cautious on how you do it.
Okay, let's move on to the masking and COVID issues. And from my preview conversation with Katie and Scott, I also learned to think about, as a restaurant, that there are the customers coming in, but there are also the staff, including the staff in the back of the house or in the kitchen, in terms of masking issues. So Katie, if you could just sort of comment on what's going on. And it's not your issue, but for those of us who live in the Mystic area, we've got a bridge, and on one side of the bridge, we've got a masking mandate. On the other side, it's a please wear a mask. And so it's confusing to the public, and then it's confusing to the restaurant. So Katie, any thoughts?
Yeah, so I mean, as I mentioned earlier, the governor left it up to the towns to whether or not they wanted to put a mandate in place. And, New London County is still in the high risk county for COVID infections. So, we did support the towns if they wanted to have a indoor mask mandate. However, we did not make the decision for them. Again, it was up to them. So I think the only thing that I can really state is that if you have concerns about, the confusion across the river, to go to your municipal leader and to express your concerns. The more people that go to them and express their concerns, the more chance there is that something could change. So, as I mentioned, we are responsible for the enforcement. So if we get a complaint, we do have to follow up. We have a bit of an in-house system, I guess you can call it, for how we respond to these complaints. So if we receive a mask complaint that someone's not wearing their mask in one of these towns, we follow up. If we can confirm the complaint, we do, and we provide education. And again, if we get a second complaint, we do the same thing. So it's not our first intention to enforce the fine that we've been told that we can enforce. We would rather take the approach that we work with the establishment and we provide the education, because we have found that there's some restaurants that weren't aware that the mayor had put an indoor mask mandate in place. So again, it's I guess just putting signs on your door, having the front of staff in the front house aware of the town's mandate and what they need to do. And then with your concerns and your suggestions, just going to your municipal leader would be my suggestions.
In terms of going to municipal leaders, I've talked to some 50 restaurants and stores on the Groton side of Mystic, and there were a couple of places that were concerned because there wasn't a mask mandate on the other side and it felt anti-competitive. But I also heard from a number of people on the Groton side that they valued the protection of the mandate because it protected their employees or somebody was immune, whatever. And so it was helpful to them. So it's not as clear cut as just go push everyone to release all the mandates and all the issues will go away, if I'm understanding this right. Is that
correct? I mean, I think it's also, like I said, Ledgely Health District supports the mask mandate. We're not out of this yet. We're still, right in the middle of COVID. So when you can't maintain that 6 foot separating distance, and you do have people that are immunocompromised, we want to support these businesses, but it's also important that we mask up and we stop the spread as best as we can. So,
thanks. Scott, in our conversation, you talked a little bit about the impact of masks previously on vaccination rates, particularly for employees. Could you just sort of comment on what you experienced, or what the phenomenon was, what the trade-off was, and now where we are?
Yeah, well, I think first and foremost, as Katie and I have talked, it is not Katie's job to enforce the mask mandate. As I talk to the governor once a week, as I love that he passed this off to 169 different towns, which has been fun, of just having conversations of who has it, who doesn't, who's keeping it or not. And just for some of the, I see Bruce on the call and for Paige and others, like making sure everyone's aware that I get it. We all want to keep people safe and everything else, but understanding that, as our numbers start to tick down, and I hope to see the eastern part of the state, I think there's a little bit of a wave right now, but hopefully that's just like what we felt here in the middle part of the state. You're seeing towns start to rescind their mask mandate, and West Hartford is going to do it on Wednesday. Danbury is doing it today, I believe. Some of the larger cities, I had conversation with Bridgeport and some others as they start to move forward, hopefully New Haven and Hartford and Mayor Bronin, understanding that there's some challenges. But to your point, Craig, I would say that there's a lot of restaurants that will still keep it for their staff. It's based on, whether there's a mandate or not. You're seeing that where the comfort level is the staff. The issue is policing it for the guests, and especially in the area where we are in New London County, where you have a lot of people coming in from Massachusetts, Rhode Island, where they don't have it. And they're just like, and then it's kind of the burden becomes on the hostess. The burden becomes on people inside the restaurant. They're like, excuse me. And they're like, oh my, I don't even have it. It's, I need to have a mask down here. I mean, I've seen it happen and I know the challenges. And I think that that's something that I just think that the leaders need to understand is, I don't think it's, we went so long from really May until August without having that. You saw some rising cases, but they weren't specific to our industry at all. There was no spread, even talking with DPH on a state level. So I hope that's continued to be considered. I think there is a weird, challenge there when you have Groton and Stonington, where that's in the middle of Mystic, because Mystic's not and where you have that, what people feel on both sides. But again, I also think that the other challenge that goes on, Craig, that's happening is two things. One is back of house. We saw, to your point, we saw a huge increase in vaccination rates of back of house workers, which, as you guys can imagine, were challenged or concerned early on about getting the vaccine. But what I went out and said, we had a huge campaign that said, hey, if you get fully vaccinated and you stand in front of a 120-degree stove all day, you don't have to have that mask on. You're not even interacting with the public. But I know how hard that is. It's brutal work for 6, 7, 8 hours to be standing in front of there, cooking for people, but having to have that mask over your face and that cloth. That was a huge piece. But obviously the towns that put the mask mandate back in, those people have to wear that, the back of house. And I think that that's something to communicate. And then the second one is the larger scale indoor events where just so the folks that are on the call, like I've seen West Hartford and other towns at least work with like large scale venues. They're like, hey, I want to have 100-person, 50-person wedding in the winter. We're seeing some of the towns get canceled and moved to other towns because these people don't, or a 40-person holiday party, they don't want to go and be masked. They know everybody. They're going to probably either do it inside their house or they're going to go to another town. And the last thing you want is to lose business because of that. And I think those are honest, real issues that are going on with the mandates that I don't think, as I've shared in the governor, I've talked at length about it. Having a mandate or not, I don't think is going to affect that the businesses are going to do what they can. There's going to be continued signs. If you're not fully vaccinated, you need to be wearing a mask. Kids as well, obviously having young kids, but at least for the staff, that's something that I think it was kind of like a 180 where it's like, hey, if you get fully vaccinated, you're not going to have to wear that mask and you're going to be great. And then all of a sudden it was like, nope, sorry, we're going back to that because the Delta variant. So I am seeing great signs and less than 2% again. We knock on wood. I feel like I look at numbers more than David Lehman and others every single day of knowing Mondays are always that hold your breath because of the weekend numbers. But we are seeing great trending. We're seeing people being protected. But I do think it's an honest conversation that anybody on this call as a restaurateur needs to be having, not with Katie, but with their town leadership, and explaining that you don't want to have a competitive disadvantage when you have surrounding towns that don't have a mandate and you do. I'm dealing with it in Simsbury where I live right now. The entire valley does not have it. You're not seeing spikes in those areas that don't have it, like Avon or Canton, but Simsbury is still holding firm. And the restaurants and the businesses are suffering because they're like, wait, this 40-person event, if it's not lifted by November 15th, they're going to go into Avon and have an event. And that's not what you want to see. And I think that's the one challenge we have right now with this mandate. And I just hope some of the leaders continue to talk and don't want to hurt businesses in the long run, because I don't think they're going to do anything that they weren't doing from May 18th till now of protecting their guests, their customers, protecting their staff. And people, the last comment I'll make, done a lot of media where they're like, oh, just make masking mandate everywhere and vaccine mandate everywhere. Everyone will feel safe and go out. Like if people don't feel safe right now, you can transmit the virus with the vaccine. You can do all those things. You can have breakthrough cases. I think that there is that population, unfortunately, that is still worried. I don't think anything that we're going to do is going to change that. We've tried, but I do think it's that understanding of looking at Massachusetts as an entire state. They have not had a mask mandate. Their numbers aren't different than ours. Their numbers in certain towns and everything else. So, I think the one thing we don't want to do is hurt businesses moving forward. And I hope that's just a good dialogue. I know red, orange, yellow, what color your town is right now versus not per 100,000. But also, like I said, to Simsbury, we're an eighth of the size of a lot of towns. So we had 14 cases in an entire week, but also 12 of them were in elementary schools. Also making sure, dig into those numbers and know, is it being affected by these businesses? Or is it being affected because they're inside schools again? So that's the other honest conversation I think that we need to continue to have, because I do want to help these restaurants, especially as we look to, you guys know, at the holiday parties and things going on in the winter, to have those. We'd rather than be controlled with probably staff wearing masks in tables around at a restaurant than probably 80 people going inside someone's house, a bigger house, and having it where there's not going to be zero control of that. But I'm not going to, again, it's every town's job. And, I will continue to advocate for our industry, but I would talk to the folks that are on this call to make sure they're speaking with the town leadership and having these honest dialogues and knowing that there are towns out there that have had a mask mandate, that have lifted it in the last, and you're going to see more and more in the coming weeks. I even heard New Haven could potentially, which be shocking. I thought they'd be the last, but New Haven is having it. I need to talk to the mayor here later today. So.
Katie, you look like you might have a comment about this. Do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I just wanted to add on to what Scott said at the end, was that with the mandates being lifted, we do send out and we post on our website at the end of every week the data of the COVID rates for the week. And it is sent to all the municipal leaders. So we do advise them with the new rates, you know, when they go up or down, to provide them with this information so that they can make the decisions they want to make about the mask mandate, whether or not they want to lift it or keep it in place. And again, that information is on our website for anyone else that wants to look at it as well. So.
Rather than going to the question of can't keep up too many issues, I'll throw an issue out that will affect people's time and at the same time advance the discussion. I think it'll be the last set of issues we have because we're reaching the end of our time. New London County, and particularly the greater Mystic area, is a tourist area, which means that the summer is when we were absolutely packed. In the winter, things slow down. And so people are going to need to figure out how they get through this. What are we anticipating in the winter? I think, Scott, you said things aren't going to get better immediately. So how do we sort of handle the tough winter before people can go outside again and be eating outside more easily?
Well, I think, Craig, it's a great point. I think as you guys, everyone that's on this call that has a restaurant, people that are going to listen in, you know your numbers. We know what weeks are great, what months are better, what opportunities are, what you expect. And I think when you start looking at your winter, you want to start comparing it to 2019 as best you can, or the early 2020 as you get into January and February. But the reality is your numbers, probably aren't going to, at least maybe they might be there in sales, but unfortunately your revenues aren't going to be close because of the rising cost, how much you're spending on labor and food and everything else. So it is really about how you can be efficient. Back to kind of Paige's point a little bit earlier, like takeout and to go has to be a part of your marketing and what you're doing this winter, how you're driving, the residents of the area. Maybe it's not as many tourists are going to come down. I wish that we could get more, but you guys know your bread and butter is, late April through, late September. Like that's what this sector of the state is. But how do you survive this winter? And looking at your sales, looking at your margins, and understanding what you can do to get through this. And I think, that would be, being creative, but trying to do certain things that, getting prepared for the season ahead. But again, you do have expanded outdoor dining through the end of March in your towns through the bill that we passed. So if you want to, as long as you get it signed off and checked, but like I know, with igloos or greenhouses or unique experiences, what's driving people to your restaurant? You guys know that already, but that outdoor dining winter experience with heaters and propane heaters or igloos, like people will travel for that as well. And I think that's not going to, making sure you're trying to find some creative ways to offer that to the public besides the indoor experience. But yeah, I mean, I don't think there's a magic answer how you're going to survive the next 6 months. Everyone has to kind of take a, tighten up their belt and figure out, okay, here's what I have in front of me. If everyone is thinking that there's going to be RRF dollars replenishing anytime soon, I'm going to keep fighting for it. But if you didn't receive, there's 2,066 businesses that didn't receive a dime. We're not going to stop fighting, but also at the same time is trying to get cooler heads down in DC to come together and put a bill that actually makes sense is much harder. If you guys watch national news of trying to talk to some of our delegates, but I hope you guys aren't thinking that's going to be your answer. I guess is my point. And then on some positive news, if you didn't take advantage of it in April, I probably think you're going to take advantage of it in May. We did pass a bill last session that allows you as a restaurant, caterer, private event, if you have the NAICS code 72, which you all do, you get a chance to keep all 7.35% of your sales tax for a week. There was August 1st to the 7th, which I'm trying to actually hear back from Mark Bowden if you can go back, because I know that's a great week for a lot of you. But you either have that week, you have the third week in December, which I highly doubt any of you will take that down there. and then you have, I believe, the second or third week in May. And what that means is when you go to provide your sales tax report the next month for those 4 weeks of the month, you get to keep that entire week of sales tax. If it's one restaurant, if it's 8, if it's 3, I had, thinking of East Lyme, and Paul Formica said to me, "Thank you for my new ice machine." He was able to upgrade his ice machine with the support and those dollars. But those are things that we try to do at the CRA to find other creative measures to help your business. So if you haven't taken advantage of that sales tax remittance yet, remember that I'm going to try to see if I can get some help back to your August numbers, but at least the May numbers. You have a chance in a week in May, and try to blow that week out, because everything you bring in sales, you get to keep the full 7.35% for that entire week, which is, it's not everything, but it is definitely something that I give a lot of support to legislative leadership in the House Democratic side for putting that bill on the floor and getting it through for us. So.
Okay, with that, I think I'd like to bring it to a conclusion. But in doing that, just a comment on my having talked with Katie and Scott in advance and then again today. You can see the sense of collaboration and taking on issues together. And this was really aimed at trying to make it easier and better for people. And it was terrific to work with both of you in this. For those who are going to see this tape at a future date, or who want to pass it on to others, it's not only being taped, but the contact information for Katie, Scott, and the Economic Development Commission will be attached to the taping of this, so that if people have follow-up questions, they can reach out. With that, I'd like to, unless anyone, Paige, you have a comment, and then we'll bring it to a conclusion.
I also just wanted to thank everyone, but one last point. We're always trying to focus on resources. I am not one that believes government has the answers for everything. I definitely don't believe that. However, we have access to information and we have access to resources. I already talked about the ARPA funding. If businesses have ideas on how we can use some of our funding to help business, I'm all ears. Secondly, another government program that does not get much attention is the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. I know it's not a grant funded program, but that EIDL program will expire the end of this calendar year, and it could be used for anything. 3.75% interest, 2-year deferral on payments. Payments can go out for 30 years. You can pay early back anything you take. If someone needs money, that's probably, for a loan, that's probably a program they want to look at. That's really my only point.
Paige, just real quick, and we just did a webinar last week with SBA and Catherine Marks, the district director. It's on our website at ctrestaurant.org. It goes through the fact that even if you got an idle early on, up to $500,000, you can up it to $2 million, as long as you go through the process. So it's a great webinar. SBA and the Connecticut Small Business Development Center are phenomenal. They give you, it's free consultation, and use that word free, of setting that up and walking you through. There are some great people that have been extremely helpful. So please use our website as a resource if you have questions. But that's a great point, Paige. There's the EIDL, and also the other one is the ERTC. Making sure our restaurants are continuing to look for that for employee retention tax credit, finding every different way that they can get support, to help, recover.
So with that comment, I think what Paige just demonstrated is the government in this case really is here to help as well, not necessarily to pay for things, but to, although there are some economic opportunities, but rather this is a collaboration of all of us, including the Mystic Chamber of Commerce, the Economic Development Commission, and Downtown Mystic Merchants. We want all the restaurants to succeed. I know personally, as a resident of Mystic, I'm at a lot of your restaurants a lot of the time. And so we as a community thrive in no small part because of what you do for the community, and we want you to succeed. Please share with others that there is a contact that would allow you to access this tape, because as busy as people are, they've not necessarily been able to participate directly, but they can at least pick up on the information, which I think was terrific, the information that people shared. Thank you very much.